Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this HCT podcast. As always, I'm your host, Lance Gormley. Our guest on the program today is Jason Greever, who is the Vice President of Strategic Development and Clinical Support with Mirror Inc. How are you doing today, Jason?
I'm great, Lance. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. For anybody watching, they know that we have endeavored to do a series that talks about addiction and recovery. We've had Community Crisis Response Team, also known as CCRT, on LA, the director there, to be able to just discuss some of the resources that they provide and how they reach out into the community and serve the needs of those who are struggling with addiction. We've also had Ben Meyer before on the program, who does Defy, which just is an outreach to individual youth in the community in order to try to make sure that we're doing the best that we can to educate and keep youth from going down that road early. We've also had Tara and Brittany on the program to talk about their life of addiction. We've had just recently another individual, Jason, on the program to talk about his life of addiction and incarceration and sobriety and what led him to that. And now we're having Jason on the program to talk more about the aspect of what Mirror does in partnership with CCRT, or just the community in general, and what things that you all are doing to try to help people in their recovery. So just want to say I really appreciate you coming on the program and talking with me today. What we always do on the program is really just try to get a bio of who you are, where you hail from, and then, so many words, how you found yourself here today. So, Jason, how'd you find yourself here today?
Thanks very much, Lance. I want to say I really appreciate being invited out this month. As we talked about it before we went on air, it's National Recovery Month, and so any opportunity to spread the word about recovery, that it's possible, that it's real, is a great opportunity for me to have. So I'm Jason Greever. I'm originally from Winfield, Kansas, just down the road. I grew up there. Winfield, I think, is a lot like Newton. The communities are very, very similar. After school, I went up to KU for a little while and was an English lit major, and then became a little more fascinated with the field research involved in the substance use treatment world. And so I went out and did a lot of field research for quite a while. And that led me down some dark roads and some dark paths. And then in 2009, that all ended, and I went back to school at Emporia State and got an undergraduate degree in rehabilitation services and became an addictions counselor. Then went back to school at Washburn and I got my master's degree in social work, so I'm a clinical social worker and a licensed clinical addiction counselor. And one of my very first jobs in the field was with Mirror, and that was in Topeka. I was a residential treatment counselor in Topeka for our residential treatment program up there, and I did that for a couple of years. And I did a little bit of work on our Work for Success program, which is a really neat program. Originally, it was for dads who were in arrears in child support to help them with personal and professional development. That has evolved into something much larger, where we're able to serve a lot more people in that program. Then I went back into the treatment side and was a clinical supervisor for Topeka, and then I became an outpatient manager when we opened the Topeka outpatient program, and became a corporate trainer and began training people across the organization. And then came to Newton and was a director of the Newton residential program and outpatient programs here in town. Then I became a divisional vice president of operations, and then vice president of treatment services, and most recently, vice president of strategic development and clinical support. So,
dang, I just gotta say that. Wow, that's a lot, man.
Yeah, so that's 13 years I've been with Mirror, and have loved every minute of it. Mirror is a large organization. We're actually the largest substance use treatment provider in Kansas. We serve over 4,000 people every year, and we started right here in Harvey County back in 1972, and it's grown into what it is today. We have facilities in Newton, Wichita, Topeka, Kansas City, up in the Shawnee, Kansas, and then outpatient programs in Medicine Lodge and Anthony and Wichita and Newton and Topeka and Lawrence and Shawnee. We have a statewide telehealth program where we can reach anybody in Kansas, and we have medications to assist addiction treatment that we provide statewide as well. So a pretty large organization doing a lot of really great work.
Yeah, I'd say that's you blew my mind just now. I just gotta say, you blew my mind. Like, I knew that Mirror was located here, of course, and then familiar with some of the opportunities that they provide for people in recovery here locally. And of course, I heard, oh yeah, they've got something in Topeka, and I follow it, right, because I want to see what resources there are available and lives that are being changed because of what Mirror is doing. So I'm a fan, I'll say. But you just, you've had quite the path, right? I mean, can I ask you, like, the first thing that comes to my mind is I always want to know the why, right? So just understanding that, that you went from doing one thing and then just progressed into what your education is, and then started serving in that role up into today, which just progressively became more and more responsibility and gave you more and more tools in your belt. Why choose this path?
So it began with a desire to help people who've been down paths that I'd been down, and to really work and connect with people individually. And so I did that for quite a while, and then really developed a love and a passion for the evidence behind why we do what we do, what the research says works really, really well. And so becoming a clinical supervisor and kind of instilling that love of evidence-based practices to the people I was supervising, and then became interested in growing programs and reaching more people and serving more people. And so that's when I got into the outpatient manager role. Then such a love of sharing any knowledge that I can obtain with folks. I began teaching at Washburn University in their social work department, and so becoming the corporate trainer fell right in line with that, where I got to go all around the state to Mirror programs and programs outside of Mirror, training people on different aspects of addiction and recovery. Then, after having traveled around quite a while, I was ready to not do quite so much traveling, and was asked to consider coming here to Newton for the Newton program, and I did. And my family and I have fallen in love with Newton and everything that the community has to offer, and we've made a home here, and then opportunities to increase my reach, increase the impact that I can make to a statewide level through working through our corporate office became available. And so each step, Lance, has been an opportunity to have a different impact. To the scope changes. And so now I have opportunities to work with professional trade organizations and on committees statewide, and some regional and national committees that with folks who are brilliant, who are doing amazing work, and I get to be in the rooms with them and learn from them and work alongside with them, and that's just an amazing opportunity.
So you had mentioned that you got into this because you wanted to help people. And I'll say there's a lot of ways that you can help people, Jason. So many different roles. If that was your true desire in your heart, was I want to be operate in a capacity where I can help people, is there any reason why addiction and recovery fell into your path, or did you just kind of find that kind of a little deeper on? Sometimes we set out to do something and then something else happens and then something else happens and you're like, okay, and we're finding our pathway as we go along. And then other times we're like, well, this is what I want to do. And then I move in that direction and check all the boxes till I get there. Was it it found you or you found it type of a scenario?
I think it was both, Lance. I'm a person in long-term recovery, and when I entered into recovery, there were some people that did amazing things to help me, and then along that path, there were also some institutions and some systems that were at work that I felt had room for improvement, and so now I have opportunities to work within those systems and within those institutions, and try to bring about change that I think is helpful to individuals and families and communities when it relates to substance use and addiction recovery.
Okay, so you had mentioned teaching classes at Washburn, right? At some point in time in your career, in your experience, have you found that many people that are in the field in which you are in to try to help people in addiction, through their addiction and into long recovery and long-term recovery, that their path has been one that they've experienced it themselves, found long-term recovery and want to go back and help people? Or is it a mixture of people how many people that you know of personally doing similar things and working on the team to make sure that in some form or capacity they're able to help people in their recovery? How many of them have been affected by addiction?
I think most people now are affected by addiction, and those are people working in the field and people who aren't working in the field. Especially, coming into the opioid epidemic, then many people's lives have been touched by that, and many more people's lives have been touched by things like alcohol use disorder and other substance use disorders, to the point where I think the stigma is going away enough. Now, there's still a lot of stigma out there, and it's a big barrier to a lot of things, but the stigma is reduced enough that people are having conversations. People are having conversations like you and I are having right now, that you had with LA and CCRT and Macario and Gina and Jason and the two ladies that you had on who shared their stories of recovery. These brave, courageous conversations are happening all over the place now. In the 1930s, Alcoholics Anonymous began, and part of the precept behind that was people were anonymous if you were in recovery, because it was so stigmatized.
Interesting.
And people remained anonymous. And you didn't talk about the fact that you were in recovery. And over the last 20 years, or so, that's really begun to change. There are things that have kind of happened around that same time, had a lot of advances in science and in brain imaging that have taught us so much about substance use disorders and taught us so much about addiction and taught us so much about recovery, and the understanding of what really happens, that it's not a moral failing, it's not just a series of terrible choices that people make because they're selfish, that it's a biological, psychological, social condition that causes clinical distress and impairment in people's lives. And that understanding that it is a chronic disorder, a lot like diabetes or a lot like hypertension, that it can be treated similarly. And so these conversations take place where we get to talk about those sorts of things. And as that happens, then the stigma begins to be reduced. Yeah. And you had talked about teaching, and you'd ask about the number of people who come who are in the field because of personal experiences. In class, I also teach at Bethel in their social work department now, and at Newman University. And there are a lot of people who get into the helping professions because they've been helped, or because they wish somebody would have been there to help them. And so there are folks who work in the substance use disorder and addiction treatment fields who have had their own personal experiences or experiences that family have had. A lot of clinicians who are in recovery. We also, in the past 10 years or so, have really begun to see a rise in peer mentoring. And these are people with lived experience in recovery, like Macario and Gina, who come on, who make such an incredible impact on people of getting them to engage in services and getting them to stay in services. So that they can get treatment that is so life-changing for them and life-saving for them, and that they can recover as well.
So I mentioned on one other podcast, and I thought about the word that I used, taboo. It's taboo to talk about it. It's taboo to mention, hey, let's both say we're sitting here and I've had a life in recovery and you haven't, but you maybe had a parent or a loved one or a friend or something that I think everybody in this world has somebody, probably in their immediate family, if not their immediate family, their close extended family, friends, somebody that they know who is not able to be the best person that they can be because they're suffering from whatever addiction has gotten a hold of them, right? Over the last, how many years do you think that we've been able to really understand more in depth about addiction, the effects? You mentioned the effects on the brain and what it is through technology. Is that something relatively new?
I would say yes and no. I think if you look at the whole history of social work, the whole history of how we treat individuals with substance use disorders has been an evolutionary process. It was not a terribly long time ago, 100 years ago, when we were putting people in sanitariums and asylums if they had a substance use disorder. Alcoholics Anonymous began to change that. The 12-step programs began to change that. As you go through the decades, you start to look into the 1970s, and the Minnesota model of treatment began to take hold, which is more reflective of what our modern treatment infrastructure looks like. Then you get into when we began to start to be able to do the brain imaging that shows the impact that substances has. When we begin to gain an understanding of how neurobiologically addiction takes hold and what occurs within the brain and within the body that creates a very chaotic and dangerous relationship with substances. So it's evolved slowly, and it continues to evolve. But right now, it's an exciting time to be in because it feels like these discussions are happening. Unfortunately, because of some terrible things that have happened, around even the tobacco industry back in the 80s, and then in looking at how alcohol companies were then doing their marketing and who they were targeting with it. That became a byproduct of the tobacco industry investigations, and then that kind of flowed into the opioid epidemic and looking at those systems that are involved with that, with how things were being prescribed and how pharmaceutical companies were marketing their products, and as those conversations have taken place on a national level, then there are a lot more conversations that are happening in living rooms, and they're such important conversations. Mirror, in addition to our treatment work, also does a lot of prevention work and has some great programs here in Harvey County. We have the DEFY program and the STAND program, and those programs are creating conversations in homes with folks, and those conversations that are happening are leading to reductions in substance use. And because people like you are having podcasts, having conversations like this, then there are going to be folks who don't end up having to experience addiction, who don't have to have the same issues with substance use and substance misuse that generations before have had to experience for themselves because nobody talked about it.
So do you think education and awareness is key?
Absolutely.
I mean, as far as, I mentioned the taboo thing. I don't know, that's not the right word, awareness maybe, or like what you said, it was something that we wanted to keep in the anonymous, so people didn't talk about it, and maybe somebody would be helped more by having the conversation, because that's what we're trying to do with this series, is to bring awareness and to bring education to people, inform people. Is education key here? Because I got to say, I want to be in one of your classes, right? I had thought about this series, and one thing that just been nagging on me was it would be really nice to be able to have a conversation with somebody that could talk about the medical effects that take place with somebody, and then maybe that type of awareness or information would create an environment where people would go, wow, I didn't know this. And even in myself with these podcasts, I'm learning so much, and it's heavy. I just got to say it's heavy. So do you think that education is key?
I think education is really important, and just having conversations. Having conversations at home with our kids about substance use, and and about mental health in general, and about having healthy lifestyles and having healthy relationships and healthy friendships, and doing things for ourselves that are healthy and that are grounded. I think that those are really important conversations to have. It's, you and I sitting here as men's mental health is terribly stigmatized.
Yeah.
And we don't talk about the fact that, oh man, I experienced depression. I have a seasonal qualifier for my depressive disorder, and Lance, every time this time of year comes around, I start to feel really low. 10 years ago, we weren't talking like that, and today we can, and again, because of the courage of people like you who are willing to bring these conversations to the forefront. When these conversations happen, in our homes with our families and with our spouses and with our kids, then we're all so much better off.
Yeah. Do you when educating people about substance use disorder? I mean, is the awareness such that light bulbs are coming on like before, where I say a light bulb moment where it's I'm always trying to look and learn and understand something better than what I did before, and I've had personal situations in my life where it's like, oh, I didn't know that. And so the light bulb went off. So when a person who's either in active addiction or in recovery is suffering from a substance use disorder, is there a lot of people that were just completely, in your experience, completely unaware of much of the information that you were able to impart to them? Like I said, not to interrupt, but I'll just say onto this track, right? Like I've often said that if people could see their life 10 years down the road when they were experiencing whatever substance they chose to use for the first time, that would you have decided that you never wanted to try that substance to begin with? And emphatically, everybody says, well, of course. So is there a part of, you're 10 years down the road, you're in Mirror, you're at a treatment facility, whether it be inpatient or outpatient, where this is the first time that people are getting the education, information to bring about their own awareness in recovery?
Absolutely. What people know about substance use and about substance use disorders is either what you experience personally or what you see on TV or in movies or you hear from your friends. And a lot of those portrayals are rooted in stigma. And that stigma is such a powerful thing. There are different types of stigma that we talk about, and we talk about this with clients. We have social stigma, and that's a way that people think about individuals with substance use disorders. That people will say that individual is a quote unquote addict, or they're a quote unquote alcoholic, which are very stigmatizing terms. Whenever we hear alcoholic, whenever we hear addict, we hear that term. There's certain images that come to our mind about what that person looks like, about what their life is like, right? And social stigma reinforces that and is informed by that, and it impacts how individuals or how society views individuals with any sort of mental health disorder or with a substance use disorder. Then that social stigma can become personalized and becomes personal stigma, and then I start to believe those things about myself that society says are true. And so if there's a social stigma that individuals with a substance use disorder are angry and they're untrustworthy and they're bad people, then I start to believe that about me. And man, talk about a barrier to engaging in services and engaging in recovery. If I know that you think I'm bad and you think I'm dishonest and you think that I'm not to be trusted and I'm manipulative and all of these terrible things, and I start to believe those things about myself, I don't want to come to you and say, hey, I know you think I'm horrible, but I really want your help. I don't want to be around you. I don't want to be around people who think that way of me. And so that's one of the reasons why these discussions are so important, because it combats stigma. Those social and those personal stigmas also become structural stigmas, where we start to have workplace policies, and we start to have laws and rules within institutions that further stigmatize people or conditions. An individual with a substance use disorder may have some involvement with the criminal justice system as a result of their substance use. And then for 7 years, they go to apply for jobs, and there's a question: have you ever been convicted of a crime on your application? And you have to check that box, yes. And a manager may be going through that, and they've got 10 applications. They say, well, this one has a criminal record. I'm going to set them in the no pile, and I'm going to look at these 9. And so as we begin to have that sort of education and that awareness publicly, then that decreases that social stigma, that decreases that institutional stigma. You ask about education and awareness and people coming into treatment, and those aha moments when people find out, I'm not there's something really real going on within my brain and within my body. When I drink alcohol, then the ethyl alcohol becomes active, and 20% of that gets absorbed in my stomach, and 80% gets absorbed in my small intestine, and it impacts the GABA in my brain, and it impacts glutamate, and that impacts my awareness and my attention and my memory, and that results in dopamine increases. And over time, that dopamine, and dopamine is I'm sure you've heard of it. It's the
feel-good.
It's the feel-good chemical. But it's not just a feel-good chemical. It's a reinforcing chemical in our brain. So when we eat, there's a dopamine release, and that has told us over the last 1 or 2 years that we've been around that, hey, eating is a really good thing. You ought to do that because it can keep you alive. And relationships are really good. And a pretty lady waves at you and smiles. There's a dopamine release. And if it's your wife, it's an even bigger dopamine release, of course. And all of those things that are good and healthy for survival and for survival of the species are what triggers those dopamine releases. Substances that people develop addictions to all act on dopamine, and it creates these dopamine spikes that are really abnormal. This kind of as a range, if you think about the average person on an average day, their brain will create about 50 nanograms per deciliter of dopamine. If it's a really good day, then it may create about 100 nanograms per deciliter of dopamine. Now, if you use alcohol, if you go out tonight and you drink with your buddies, that's going to create 200 to 300 nanograms per deciliter of dopamine in your brain. Right? It's also going to, as I said, impact it's going to increase GABA in your brain. It's going to decrease glutamate. And after you do that for a while, then your brain starts to adjust, and it says, hey, Jason is drinking, and so my brain doesn't need to produce the same amount of dopamine, and it doesn't need to produce the same inhibitory chemicals that reduce the glutamate, or so those neural adaptations begin to occur, and you change the way your brain begins to function, so that when I don't drink, right, then I don't, not only do I not have the dopamine from drinking, but my body stopped producing it at the same levels. So I don't have my 50 nanograms per deciliter of dopamine. And dopamine is responsible for reward. It's also responsible for motivation, right? That's what gets me up out of bed in the morning, is the dopamine in my brain. So my dopamine levels are down. Those other chemicals are off. And my brain thinks that in order to function, then I need that alcohol in order to feel like a normal person. Otherwise, I'm going to feel terrible, and I'm not going to have any energy, and I'm not going to feel good. The parts of the brain that become impacted by substance use, the mesolimbic system, part of our primitive brain becomes impacted, and that's a part, Lance, that's responsible for things like survival. It's a part of our brain that tells us we need to drink, that we need to eat, that we need to procreate. And addiction works on that same part of the brain
So could one say? Because I mean, you are blowing my mind right now. I'll just say this, and thank you, because I think it's a godsend that you're out here, because it's just what you're explaining is exactly what I was hoping to have someone come on, and we didn't talk about what we were going to talk about before we came on the program necessarily, or that we would cover this. But I'll just say I'm firing on all cylinders right now. And what I hear you saying, not projecting onto you, but just answer this question for me. What you're saying is that somebody that is suffering from a substance use disorder, and not even necessarily somebody that suffers from a substance use disorder and as much as partakes in some kind of substance or uses some kind of substance, or however this dopamine hit is manufactured. We've talked a lot about, even not to go off track, but social media and how, that text messages and phones and the addiction of all that.
That Facebook like.
Yes, the Facebook like.
That creates a dopamine spike.
But what you're saying is that I could transfer and really just say, not projecting on you, but just please answer this for me. If I need this to survive.
Absolutely. And that's what I was talking about, the primitive part of the brain that's responsible for letting us know that we need food, letting us know that we need sleep, letting us know that we need water. That part of the brain is what tells us that we need methamphetamine, or that we need alcohol, or that we need benzodiazepines, or that we need cocaine, or that we need opioids, right? And we're getting that message, and this isn't a cognitive process. This isn't taking place up here in the frontal part of our lobe, or in our frontal lobe. It's taking place in parts that we're not even processing through thought. Just like our body tells us we have to eat to survive, it's telling us, I have to use methamphetamine in order to survive. I have to use alcohol in order to survive. And questions get asked like, well, how could an individual choose that substance over their family? How could they choose that over their wife? How could they choose that over their children? Well, because their brain was telling them that without it, they would die. Right? So if I want to be a father, and my brain has been hijacked by substances, and my neural pathways have been rerouted, and I think that I need methamphetamine in order to survive, in order for me to be around for my children, then I have to have meth, or I have to have alcohol, or whatever substance it is that I've developed a substance use disorder.
And is this the same with, like, we want to talk about, like, let's say we talk about a worst case scenario, right? Mm-hmm. Which is somebody that suffers from an addiction for a long period of time. They found themselves maybe in some precarious situations, whether that be criminal situations, whether that be their family falling apart, not being, they know, I'm assuming in their conscious mind that, well, my whole world is falling apart, and I can make the connection because people are telling me that it's this addiction, and I'm watching that I'm not a better person today than what I was 10 years ago when I started using. But how fast does this happen? Like, for an individual, right? So if I'm somebody that's saying, well, you're telling me that if I go and I drink some alcohol, that just because I drink some alcohol, that affects my brain to tell me that I somehow or another have to survive to have it, and I'm not conscious about that, but that's the drive to go drink more alcohol? Or how does that work with a common person that does not identify with himself as having a substance use disorder, but then does in some ways participate in substance use, such as drinking alcohol?
Sure. So why do some people drink and they go out on the weekends, they have a great time, and then they may or may not ever use alcohol again? Yeah. And then there are others who begin drinking problematically. Yes. Why is there that difference? So there are risk factors, and protective factors that increase or decrease somebody's likelihood that they could develop a substance use disorder. And so one of the big ones is heredity. 40 to 60% risk of whether or not you'll develop a substance use disorder comes biologically, just with what you were born with. And so that is a risk. The environment that you live in can be a risk factor, or it can be a protective factor, right? So if I live in an environment in which I see if I'm growing up and I see my parents drinking, and I see my extended family using drugs, then that's normalized, and then I think it's something that's okay to do, and so I'm more likely to do it. So Conversely, if I see family use alcohol responsibly and not use illicit drugs, then I'm learning from that environment as well, and I'm learning how to use substances responsibly, and hopefully having conversations too about responsible substance use. Someone's poverty level. Individuals who are in poverty have a greater likelihood of developing a substance use disorder. So you look at all the different things that put people at risk, the social determinants of health. Right? The riskier, the more at risk I'm at in those social determinants of health with relation to housing and family and education and poverty and food stability. All of those things, when they're working the way we want them to work, act as protective factors and decrease the likelihood that my substance use could become problematic. Conversely, if those are risky areas for me, that increases the likelihood that I may develop a substance use disorder.
Okay, so you're blowing my mind. That's all I can say. I want to learn more and know more, right? Because obviously my desire is to ensure that people that are suffering, that somehow I can help them too, right? But I don't have the same education as you, obviously. And I'm learning a lot from just sitting here and having this conversation. But just moving forward, how do I want to ask this question? I'm just going to be blank. We see a lot of people that have and struggle with substance use disorder. How then does this is how I'm gonna ask. So you mentioned that this is a survival mechanism and I agree with that if I don't have this substance, I'm gonna die, right? That can quickly lead you into a very bad situation where, I mean, we've all seen individuals and have impressions of individuals that we're clearly looking at that have mental health issues, that are in bad situations, or couple a little bit of that with some substance and the disorder, and now we found ourselves in a very bad situation by societal standards, right? Unable to function in what we would call the normal way of holding a job, having a residence, being responsible, taking care of our kids, taking care of our significant other, whatever the case may be. So, at what point in the process does an individual come to the understanding that what you're saying is happening, and therefore I need to retrain my brain?
That's the $10 million question. If someone had come to me when I was 14 years old and was having my first beer, out at the farm, then if they had sat down and explained to me, like, these are the risk factors, these are protective factors, this is what neurobiologically can happen to you, I may have made different choices at the age of 14. I may not have, but I may have. What you talked about a process, and I think that's a great term to use because, or the term progression, right? So how do we progress from having that first drink when we're 14 years old to having an alcohol use disorder, at the age of 30, right? And more importantly, what do we do to interrupt that process, right? And the things that we do, the things that MIRA does in its prevention program to try to prevent adolescents from using substances are the same things that we do on the treatment side. We try to build community, we try to build support, we try to build resources, we try to connect people with people, we try to provide education, and when those things are introduced in the process, impacts whether or not someone will go through a disease process where that mesolimbic system is completely hijacked, or whether that disease process can be interrupted earlier and an individual can begin recovery or never develop a substance use disorder.
Yeah. So prevention is key, right? It's key. So and that's why I'm a fan of Defy. I realize, like, yes, this is a much needed resource just to educate, inform, and hopefully prevent youth, which are in that risk stage. The first time I ever endeavored into substance use, I was 14 years old.
Sure.
And then the majority of experimenting with different substances was during my teenage years. So I mean, it's like I've said it many times before. It's very unlikely that somebody who's 30 years old is just going to say, "Hey, I'm going to go develop a meth habit." Right. So it's usually when somebody's in that younger age that they're out here social conditioning and peer pressure and the whole thing, that they endeavor to do that. Then before too long, they're in a situation where their brain, without consciously being aware of it, is telling them, "Hey, that's." Are you saying that's how strong the biological desire is to use? Is once you talked about the part of the brain that it affects. So if I mean, I'm somebody that's going, well, I mean, at some point in time, it has to come down to a choice, right? Like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to use this anymore. I see where I'm at now versus where I want to be. This is not working. I realize and have identified that this is the issue. Well, if my brain is still conditioned subconsciously, or the need for this, how does the process of getting out of that into long-term recovery happen?
Yeah. The process of the pathway into recovery can be different for every single person, and it sometimes has to do with significant events in someone's life. For some people, look, I realized that I had a dispute with my spouse last night, and the reason was because I was under the influence of alcohol. I need to do something about it now, right? Then people are able to intervene very early on that. Some folks, they find themselves just as involved. Oh my gosh, I'm sitting in a jail cell because I was just arrested for possessing fentanyl. That can be a moment at which someone realizes, my gosh, there's something going on in my life right now that isn't working out very well for me. But then that awareness or that knowledge has to be coupled with more. That's when people need to start gaining resources and knowledge and awareness and supports. And I'm such a fan of the Waymakers Academy here in Harvey County Jail that Mira's just got to become involved in, because that's capturing those folks in that justice-involved setting where Macario and Gina and L.A. and Julie are able to intervene and say, hey, this might be what's going on with you right now. And before people are released from incarceration, they can start to get some of those tools and start to develop some of that community, or some of that community within the Harvey County Jail. And then upon release, they get to meet with Gina, or they get to meet with Macario, and they're going to take them to treatment. They may bring them to right up the street to our program here in Newton. They may decide that, what, everybody I know in Harvey County that I hang out with is doing the same things that I'm doing, and I may need to get away from these folks for a little while. And so Gina and Macario may take them up to our program in Topeka, or to a different program somewhere else in the state. But it's because that Waymakers Academy has allowed resources to be positioned and available for people at a crucial time when they most need them. And so it leads to your question, which I think of, at what point does someone realize that they need to do something differently, and how do they go about doing that when the systems in their brain have been rewired to the contrary? Whenever people aren't under the influence, then the cognitive processes become a little bit different, right? When you're not under the influence of drugs or alcohol, you think differently than you do when you are. So you're no longer impaired. And so that can provide some clarity of thought that's happening up here in the prefrontal cortex that will allow you to make the decisions to put yourself in different situations where you're not going to be as at risk. So
it's achievable.
Absolutely.
Like when we're saying, so then does it become, when I'm in a clear state of mind and I'm going through the process? Let's just say we use the example of somebody that has found themselves in the justice system. Okay, I would say somewhat over time the justice system has changed when it comes to the awareness of addiction and wanting for there to be programs like Waymakers come into the jail, and where they support CCRT, and when they look to say, hey, this person, we picked them up because they were out here doing what they weren't supposed to. They were not in their right state of mind. We found some substance on them, and so then now they're going through this justice system. They meet up with Mercario and Gina. They want to do something different. So then the direction is, well, let's get you into a treatment facility of some kind. So then here comes Mir. Then when they go through this process of education, awareness, and this, the light bulb moment comes on and says, well, I can do something different. I want to do something different. How long does it take for someone's brain to no longer be, and you said it's different, but how long does it take to rewrite the paths in the brain? Is when it comes to substance use disorder, is the brain rather has the ability to bounce back quickly?
Yeah, so there's a fancy term called neuroplasticity, and that's what you're referring to. So the brain, the neural pathways were rewired because of substance use. Well, those can become rewired again into a lifestyle of recovery, into making recovery-oriented choices, to having recovery-oriented emotions. Because when I talked about some of the parts of the brain that substance use impacts, there are a whole lot more. Substance use impacts not just that mesolimbic system and the primitive parts of our brain that relate to survival, but it impacts the parts of our brain that process things emotionally for us, and the cognitive parts of our brain, right? So over time, what's happened with substance use is we've introduced a substance, we've introduced a substance, we've introduced a substance, we've introduced a substance, and that's what's created the change in the brain. And so when we do the opposite, and we don't use the substance, and we don't use the substance, and we don't use the substance, right? And we seek out the support, we have the conversation with someone in our life who is supportive of us, or we go to a community recovery support group meeting, whether it be Celebrate Recovery, or we go to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, or we go to lots of different pathways into recovery and community support. When those behaviors become repeated over and over again, then that begins to rewire those neural pathways again. Part of the risk is that once you've rewired your brain, right, you've created these neurological superhighways in your brain, right, and that's what addiction does, creates those superhighways. So then, over time and through repeated behavior, then we have developed all these detours, and we've developed new highways, and then we've developed recovery superhighways. Right? Part of the challenge is that those addictive superhighways haven't gone anywhere. We're just not using them anymore. And so if someone returns to substance use after a period of time, then we're back on that old superhighway system. And the way our body has adapted to those substances has changed too. And so now our brain is operating off of that superhighway system, and the rest of our body is not. That's what leads a lot of folks into overdose when they experience a recurrence of use.
Okay. Yeah, you're explaining some. Okay. I just got to say it again, Jason. You're leaving me speechless. You're giving me information, and I'm processing this information, and it's almost leaving me in a situation where I'm speechless and don't necessarily know what questions to ask, because I'm just processing this information that you're giving me and thinking to myself, I want to know more, I want to understand more, I want to learn more, which then obviously is what's happening. But I just am having a real moment here where I'm processing what you're saying, and it's like, okay, so with just trying to understand and for the audience to understand, something I've often wondered, and I mean, just a real moment and a direct question, and in your line of work, I know you'll be able to answer it, but it's for me very disheartening to see people, especially loved ones, who are suffering from addiction. Obviously, you mentioned everybody's addiction is not the same, but for somebody who, like myself, who's just I'm not you, right? I don't know what you know, right? And a lot of people probably listening to this are just like, wow, this is information overload, and I'm learning more about addiction and substance use disorder, but is there hope in recovery?
There's absolutely hope in recovery. There's absolutely hope in recovery.
So if my loved one, or I know somebody that is, we just talked about at the beginning of the program, everybody pretty much knows somebody. And sadly, when people are in active addiction and that's driving them, it doesn't make for a great relationship. And
Correct.
Usually when we're in active addiction, the people that we hurt first and hurt the most are the people that love us and care about us and are in our intimate relationships. And I've often said that what happens is everybody that's not doing and participating in whatever activity you are removes themselves quickly from your life, and all you have left are the people that are there doing the same exact thing. So how do we, when people are like, this person in my life has done XYZ PDQ, and I've removed myself from this situation because of their continued substance use. And then there creeps in this understanding that, well, maybe they'll never get better, or they'll always be this way, or, even like you had mentioned with projecting onto that, which you can't fault people for because, you hurt them. I've often said, I've often said, not only is somebody that's involved in substance use disorder a victim, but because of their addiction, everybody else around them becomes the victim.
Absolutely.
Right. And so to focus on the fact that now you have people that are hurt and victimized by this person who's a victim themselves, but in their active addiction, speaking to those people, is there hope for people that are in active addiction?
There is. And part of what I think is helpful is to differentiate between the person and the behavior, right? And so I can love you, Lance, if you're using substances, and I can care deeply about you, and I can also set healthy boundaries for myself that are going to prevent me from being hurt more by you. Right, so I can stop putting myself into situations in which you can exploit me financially. I can set boundaries with you in which I'm going to be physically safe in case that's become a part of your substance use is an increase in violence. And I can still love you, and I can still provide resources for you, and I can still provide support for you, and I can still connect you with people and resources that will be good for you, and I can still pray for you, and I can still love on you, and I can still invite you to Christmas dinner. Hopefully, of course, there are circumstances where maybe that's not as good, but there's hope for folks. But the individuals in the lives of individuals with substance use disorders need to take care of themselves too. They need to have healthy boundaries. They need to have support for themselves. There are great groups like Al-Anon, Narcanon, different anonymous organizations for the friends, family, and loved ones of individuals with substance use disorder. Family therapy is wonderful and can do a lot in helping people to navigate those family dynamics that come when someone has a substance use disorder.
So, hope is key.
Hope is key.
Hope is key.
Hope and love.
Hope and love. Okay, we are getting short on time. I would say this is a conversation that could go on for 2 hours. I think you have a wealth of knowledge that's just unbelievable, and that your path has led you to just be able to educate and inform people, and I'm glad that you came out here on the program to do it. I'd love to have a longer conversation with you, Jason. And hopefully out of this we can continue to dialogue after the fact, and they help me understand how I can better help other individuals, you know. But with that being said, I always give the guest the last word to speak directly to the hearts and the minds of everybody listening. What do you got, Jason?
So first, thank you very much for the opportunity to come out here, because I love this. I love the opportunities to get out here and share some knowledge and share some of the education that I've had and some of the things that I've learned, and to hopefully give some people some hope, because that's really what it's all about. You know, this is National Recovery Month, and what the meaning behind National Recovery Month is that we celebrate recovery. We know that there are about 23.1 million people in America who are experiencing a substance use disorder right now. And we know that there are about 50.1 million Americans who identify as being in recovery from a substance use disorder. So we do recover, and people change, and change is possible.
Thank you, Jason. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Lance.
Absolutely.
I appreciate
that
you too.
Statistic even brings hope, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah. Just want to thank everybody for listening to this HCT podcast. As always, I was your host, Lance Gormley, and our guest on the program was Jason Greever, who is the Vice President of Strategic Development and Clinical Support with Mirror Inc. Have a good one, everybody.
Thanks.